From solid steel steering columns to straight pipe exhausts, from lap-only seatbelts to razor-sharp hood ornaments. These 10 strange car features are now illegal. Number 10. Non-collapsible steering columns. In the 1950s and early 1960s, the steering column was a solid steel rod running directly from the steering wheel to the front axle. In a frontal collision, that rod did not bend, compress, or deform. It transmitted the full force of the impact directly into the driver's chest. Ford introduced the collapsible steering column in 1968 after federal safety standards required it, and the solid column disappeared from American production cars almost immediately. A modern vehicle submitted for crash certification with a rigid steel column connecting the wheel to the chassis fails the frontal impact test at the first barrier strike. The collapsible column is not a structural requirement that exists because the alternative killed drivers in crashes that the rest of the car survived. Number 9. Front seats without three-point belts. The three-point seatbelt was invented by Niels Bohlin at Volvo in 1959, and it was offered as standard equipment that same year. American manufacturers resisted for nearly a decade before federal law mandated three-point belts in all front outboard seating positions for the 1968 model year. Before that, new cars were sold with no belts at all, or with lap-only belts that held the occupant's pelvis in place while the upper body continued forward into the dashboard at full collision speed. A new passenger vehicle submitted for sale today without three-point belts in every front outboard position does not receive federal certification. The lap-only belt is not a vintage feature. It is an injury mechanism that took a decade of federal pressure to remove from production. Number 8. Spike center steering wheels. Early American steering wheels used hard metal horn rings and center bosses that protruded toward the driver's face. In a collision, the driver's head traveled forward and met the center of the steering wheel at speed. Modern steering wheel standards require the center boss to deform on impact, distribute load across a larger surface area, and to house a functional airbag that deploys within milliseconds of a qualifying impact. A steering wheel with a rigid protruding center boss cannot integrate an airbag and fails current head impact criteria. The spike center wheel is not a styling option that fell out of fashion. It is a design that modern crash testing eliminates in the first barrier run. Number 7. Pop-up headlights with rigid housings. The Lamborghini Countach, the Ferrari 308, the Mazda RX-7, and the Toyota Supra all used retractable lamp housings that rose from the hood on electric motors. European pedestrian impact regulations, introduced in the early 2000s, require the front end of any new vehicle to deform progressively on contact with a pedestrian's leg and head. A rigid pop-up housing with hard edges and a mechanical lifting mechanism creates an unacceptable strike point that fails pedestrian impact testing at the hood leading edge. The pop-up headlight disappeared, not because designers stopped wanting it, but because the housing structure required to make it work is incompatible with the deformable front-end geometry required by current pedestrian safety law. Number 6. Neon underglow in restricted colors. Neon tube lighting mounted beneath a vehicle's body panels was a fixture of custom car culture through the 1980s and 1990s. Continuous red or blue neon running along the rocker panels or wheel wells is prohibited on public roads in the majority of American states because those colors are reserved for emergency and law enforcement vehicles. Several states prohibit all external neon on public roads, regardless of color, permitting it only at shows or on private property. A production car fitted with continuous red or blue underglow lighting does not legally operate on a public road in most of the country the moment it leaves the dealership. The first 5 features were engineering decisions that safety regulations made obsolete. The next 5 are where the law gets specific, the penalties get serious, and the restrictions go further than most classic car owners realize. Number 5. Red and blue strobe lighting on civilian vehicles. Fitting a private vehicle with red and blue strobe lights, or with a light bar that produces emergency vehicle patterns, is a criminal offense in virtually every American jurisdiction. The The statutes are specific: red and blue alternating or simultaneous strobes on a non-emergency vehicle constitute impersonation of a law enforcement or emergency response vehicle, regardless of the driver's intent. Several states extend the prohibition to any lighting configuration that a reasonable observer would interpret as an emergency signal. In many jurisdictions, possession of the equipment configured to produce the prohibited pattern is sufficient for enforcement, even if the lights are not activated at the time of the stop. Number 4. Unshielded high output light bars. Roof-mounted and bumper-mounted light bars with very high lumen output became popular on road-going trucks and four-wheel drive vehicles in the 2000s and the 2010s. Federal motor vehicle safety standards and state traffic codes set maximum intensity and beam pattern requirements for auxiliary lighting operated on public roads. A light bar that produces output above the regulated lumen cap, that is aimed without the required beam cutoff, or that is operated without covers on roads where auxiliary forward lighting is restricted, fails public road standards in most jurisdictions. High output bars are legal as equipment, but operating them uncovered on a public road in most states is not. Number 3. Razor-sharp hood ornaments. The spirit of ecstasy on pre-modern Rolls-Royce models, the leaping Jaguar on early bonnets, and dozens of similar designs used rigid metal forms with edges and points that created significant injury risk in pedestrian contact. European regulations on sharp external projections and pedestrian head impact zones prohibit fixed rigid ornaments in the hood leading area on new vehicles. Rolls-Royce addressed the requirement with a spring-loaded retractable mount. Jaguar moved the ornament to the grille surround. Both solutions exist specifically because the original fixed metal design fails current pedestrian impact certification. Number 2. Doors without side impact beams. Vintage American cars use door shells pressed from thin sheet steel with no internal reinforcement structure. A side impact at moderate speed drove the door shell directly into the occupant's torso, with no energy management between the striking vehicle and the passenger compartment. In the 1990s, federal side impact standards required internal door beams capable of managing intrusion loads, foam energy absorbers between the beam and the door trim, and a structural load path that transfers side impact energy into the floor and roof structure rather than into the occupant. A door shell with no internal beam structure fails federal side impact pole testing on the first run. Number 1. Straight pipe exhaust on public roads. A straight pipe exhaust system removes the muffler and resonator from the exhaust path, allowing combustion gases to exit the engine with no acoustic attenuation. The resulting noise output on most V8 engines exceeds the decibel limits set by state traffic codes across the majority of American jurisdictions. This noise alone runs afoul of legal limits. Muffler delete modifications are specifically prohibited by statute in most states. Federal emissions regulations additionally require exhaust systems to maintain catalytic converter function, which straight pipe configurations eliminate entirely. A production vehicle submitted for emissions certification with a straight pipe exhaust fails hydrocarbon and carbon monoxide output testing before the noise measurement is taken. The straight pipe is not a performance modification that fell out of favor. It is a configuration that fails both noise and emissions requirements simultaneously on the first test.